Okay, we're going to give everyone a few minutes to join us tonight. I really appreciate everyone coming on board with us. This is a really important topic, and we've got some great speakers for you. So we'll give a few minutes for people to join us. And LC and Cass, if you can kind of let me know when we've got a decent number on there, I'll get started. Okay, let me bear with me a second here. All right. Well, good evening and welcome to Band Together, Protecting LGBTQ plus Military Rights. I'm Bob Jensen, Board Vice Chair for Minority Veterans of America. We're proud to be joined with our co-hosts Sparta Pride and Modern Military Association America for this important discussion. Tonight we gather at a crucial juncture in history, not just for LGBTQ plus service members, veterans and their families, but for the integrity of our military itself. To understand where we are, we must first look at where we have been. For as long as this country has had a military, LGBTQ plus individuals have served with honor and distinction, yet for much of that time they served in silence, under threat of discharge, harassment, or worse. Policies like the World War II era blue discharges and don't ask, don't tell forced thousands to hide who they were, denying them not only their dignity, but access to benefits and opportunities they had earned. We fought for decades to repeal those policies, and in recent years, we achieved significant victories. In 2011, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell allowed thousands of service members to finally serve openly. Executive Order 14004, issued in 2021, further advanced that progress by allowing transgender service members to serve authentically and access the health care they need. However, as we stand here today, these hard-won rights are once again under attack. We're seeing an unprecedented surge of anti-LGBTQ plus executive orders and legislative actions designed to undermine inclusion, risk access to health care, and and erase the contributions of LGBTQ plus people in uniform. These policies frame diversity and equity as threats to readiness and security, when in fact they're essential to building a strong, capable military force. That is why tonight's conversation is so urgent. In recent years, we've witnessed a coordinated assault on the rights and well-being of LGBTQ plus service members, veterans, and their families. Tonight, we're going to delve into recent executive orders and explore how those policy changes have and could continue to impact healthcare access, fundamental rights, and the very future of military service. With that context in mind, let's delve into the heart of tonight's discussion. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and experts who will help us break down the policies threatening our community and explore the paths forward. We're going to hear from incredible voices tonight, service members, veterans and their families, advocates, and subject matter experts who bring firsthand experience and deep knowledge to this front. They'll share stories, discuss the real-world impacts of these policies, and offer insights on how we can protect and advance the rights of LGBTQ plus individuals in and after the uniform. A few important notes before we get started. Tonight is about providing information and a space for us to come together, and it's an opportunity for us to support the critical work of organizations who support LGBTQ plus service members, veterans, and their families 365 days a year. It's never been more important to support organizations like Sparta, Modern Military, and Minority Vets of America as we continue to work to fill crucial gaps in the coming months, weeks, and years. Throughout the evening, we'll spotlight each organization and share a link to give to our joint fundraiser. Please consider supporting and helping us reach our goal of $10,000. At the end of the evening, we'll leave time for Q&A and answer as many of your burning questions as we can. Please use the Q&A function to share your questions, and we'll try to answer live or provide a written response from a panelist live. Okay, let's go on to our first segment, executive orders and policy changes. What do they mean and what changes are to come? We have our speaker, Peter Perkowski, legal and policy director. Since coming into office, President Trump has issued a wave of bigoted executive orders that target transgender Americans and attempt to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the federal government and private sector. Now, let's be clear. Anti-DEA is simply coded language for anti-Black and brown, and so-called efforts to protect women aren't actually about protecting women at all. These policies roll back equal opportunity protections, and they restrict access to critical health care and rights and undermine efforts to foster equity, inclusion, and opportunity. They create a hostile environment both in the military and beyond for anyone who doesn't conform to the narrow exclusionary vision of who deserves to belong and thrive. To help us unpack these executive orders and their impact on LGBTQ plus service members, veterans, their families, and vulnerable communities across the country, we're grateful to have a member of the Minority Veterans of America team, Peter Perkowski, the legal policy and policy director. And he's going to provide us some critical insights into these policies, what's already happening, and some of what we can expect moving forward. Please join me in welcoming Peter to the stage. Welcome, Peter. Before we get started, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Give your name, pronouns, connection to community, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Peter Perkowski, he, him pronouns. I'm the legal and policy director, as you said. I did not serve, but I have been working in delivering equity, restoring honor and dignity, and kind of systemic policy change for LGBTQIA plus veterans and service members for, I don't know, almost 15 years since actually Don't Ask, Don't Tell's repeal, and also for service members living with HIV. So I've been knee deep in this work for a while now.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, Peter. First, can you walk us through some of the key new executive orders and policies that we should be aware of and tracking closely?
Yeah, well, buckle up, everybody, because this could take up the whole hour, but I'm going to be pretty quick. I just want to start with a kind of a sense that what an executive order is. It just as it sounds, it's a document from the executive, which is the president here, ordering members of the executive departments, what we know is one of the three branches of government, to do certain things. The executive order is basically a policy declaration of sorts and an instruction to other agencies of the executive branch to do certain things. It doesn't actually do things itself except provide those policy declarations and those instructions. So Trump has been in office, what now, 20 some days? I lost count. It seems like it's been ages, but he's already issued 46 executive orders. For some context, President Biden, during his entire four-year term, issued 77 executive orders. And one of the first executive orders that Trump signed in his second term rescinded 68 of President Biden's 77 executive orders. And one of those that was rescinded was Executive Order 14,004, which was the order that provided for equality of service for transgender people. Now, that wasn't, all that did is remove the policy of President Biden. It didn't do anything beyond that, but from that rescission followed, let's see, four other EOs that I want to focus on that affect trans people. I want to kind of reframe this away from LGBTQ plus executive orders and focus on our trans siblings and family members, because that's really who is under attack. The first was this an executive order about defending women, which essentially defines for the federal government purposes what they call biological sex, which is not a thing, and establishes policy of the government that recognizes just two sexes, and those two sexes are based on your sex assigned at birth. So that was it essentially has a follow-on effects for various kind of areas of the government, including identity documents and passports and things like that. From that executive order flows a few more, including the ones that really impact our military and veteran community. It's called the Prioritizing Military Excellence and Readiness. It declares as false this, what they call gender ideology. And it kind of disclaims any use of gender identity as a concept for the purposes of our military excellence and readiness. And it actually, somewhat surprisingly and it really shockingly, it declares that a person who has a gender identity or who declares a gender identity that's different from their sex assigned at birth is incompatible with military service and essentially dishonorable, because they're going against kind of what is true. So that's very frightening language. I know the incompatible with military service has been used in the past for the LGB part of our alphabet, and now it's being used against trans people and declaring them essentially like bad people and bad military enlisted and officers. After that, we get kind of outside of the military a little bit. There's an executive order about protecting children, and it essentially prohibits the use of federal funds for gender affirming care. And that includes TRICARE. So that would have a broad impact on not just service members, but also family members. And then there's an executive order about keeping men out of biological sex assigned at birth, out of women's sports. And that's exactly what it sounds like. Just kind of attacking the community from that angle as well.
Great. So can you elaborate on the executive orders targeting diversity, equity, inclusion, and how do these policies affect marginalized communities, particularly within military and veteran spaces?
Yeah, I kind of sort these into two categories. The first is what we just talked about, the anti-trans EOs. And then here are the DEI EOs. EIEIO, I guess. The first is actually called Ending the Radical, DEI programs. What that does is essentially declare that these ongoing efforts from the past to establish equity, recognize how racial differences come into play in both kind of employment and other areas is just eliminated. And it kind of targets federal contractors, federal employees, and federal programs that kind of have this DEI as their kind of either central organizing principle or have kind of promulgated policies and procedures around them. I just want to take a second to kind of discuss how that affects the military specifically. So just a few things that have happened since that policy declaration. Well, actually, let me go first. Underneath that broad elimination of radical DEI, as they call it, was the EO that they called Restoring America's Fighting Force. And it essentially just takes that anti-DEI idea and applies it specifically in the military. So a few things that have happened since then, very concerning. West Point announced that it would disband kind of its clubs and interest groups that center around identity. whether it's ethnic or racial identity, sexual orientation or gender identity, anything of that, well, if women, anything of that nature, it's gone. They're prohibited from using federal resources from meeting, and that can be broadly construed as allowing people to go into a building, right? Ironically enough, one of the clubs and interest groups that aren't affected by this policy declaration are religious clubs and interest groups. So there is a clear dichotomy going on here. The Air Force has disbanded its barrier analysis working groups, which were working groups that, as the name implies, looked at barriers to access for women, for racial and ethnic minorities, and sexual minorities. Those are gone. The VA fired the directors of the Center for Minority Veterans and the Center for Women Veterans. The Defense Intelligence Agency issued a memo that essentially paused the special observance of several holidays and recognized months like Pride Month and Black History Month and things like that. Those are just, the agency itself will no longer recognize those. And the Secretary of Defense issued a memo calling for declaring that the Department of Defense will focus its policies on merits-based colorblind policies, which sounds great, but we know how that works. It's really just a continuation of historical discrimination. Established a task force in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, which is supposed to examine these things and report back in June. Declared that sex, race, and ethnicity will not be considered for promotions, and eliminating any advisory boards and councils that might kind of have this DEI aspect. And finally, there was one other EO, ending radical indoctrination in K through 12 education. I don't know why the Department of Defense or the Secretary of Defense was included in that, although there's a couple programs under the Department of Defense that do pertain to education. So that extended the DEI issues into those programs as well.
Okay, so we just have a little bit of time left before we go on to the next session. Can you quickly talk a little bit about the legal pushback we've seen so far in response to these policies, and what legal challenges can we expect moving forward? Just, real quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on that I don't know, but here's what I do know. There are, at last count, and there's a great website out there, we can put it in the comments. There are 6 or 7 lawsuits, sorry, no, 9, that have challenged various aspects of these policies that we're talking about today. There are 2 challenges to the order on gender identity that forces the transgender inmates in the Bureau of Prisons to be housed according to their birth sex. And both of them have a TRO issue that kind of prevents moving trans people into those situations. There are 2 challenges to the trans military ban. There was a hearing earlier this week that kind of paused some negative consequences that were being forced on a specific transgender service member who was being forced to kind of perform their duties in their birth sex, and that was paused. And then there's a hearing tomorrow on a greater kind of preliminary injunction that would hopefully be nationwide and prevent those aspects from going into effect. There's one challenge on the ban on gender affirming care for people under 19 and under, I think it is. So that's going forward. There is one challenge to the ban on DEIA initiatives that affect kind of federal funding and how federal grantees are affected by that. And then there's a challenge to the removal of information from the Department of Health and Human Services website that pertain to gender identity issues. Those were deleted and are being challenged there. So those are the ones I know about. I know more are coming. I don't know when. I don't know exactly how they're going to look, but they are definitely out there. And
Right.
shout out to some of our members here, including some who will speak later, who are plaintiffs in those lawsuits, including one that was filed today in the Western District of Washington, challenged the trans military ban. So
Right.
good luck to everybody.
Right. Well, Peter, thank you so much. We really appreciate your overview here. It really kind of gives us a lot to think about, and basing things on merit. I think the current Secretary of Defense certainly didn't yet get his job based on merit. So thank you once again very much. So up next, we have our first organizational spotlight featuring Sparta Pride, an organization that stands as a beacon of hope and strength for transgender individuals who currently serve or have served in the U.S. military. As an independent 501c3 nonprofit, Sparta Pride is committed to supporting, educating, and advocating for those in service. Their work extends beyond individual support. They collaborate with other LGBTQ plus advocacy organizations, such as ours and others, and modern military to promote a military culture where every individual is valued and able to contribute their talents fully and without fear of discrimination. It's my great pleasure to introduce Commander Emily Hawking Schilling, who will share more about Sparta Pride's mission and impact. Please join me in welcoming Emily to the stage. Commander Schilling, thank you for joining us. To start, could you briefly introduce yourself and share a bit about your role within Sparta Pride?
Yeah, Bob. Well, first off, thank you for coming, and thank you to everybody that's out there for joining us tonight. I've never been called a beacon, but I'll add it to the list of names. So I'm Commander Emily Hawking Schilling, she, her. I'm president of Sparta. I am active duty at about 19 and a half years. So these views are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the DoD or the United States Navy. So Sparta is an organization that was first formed in 2012 as a clandestine org. So this is before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, before trans open service was ever allowed in 2016. And it was a coming together of individuals not only to support themselves and each other, but to start working towards allowing for open service. We've stayed very true to our roots. So although we are open now, we still primarily focus on peer support. We have 2,300 active and reserve members currently in our group, and our goal is to provide them with world-class support. What that looks like is being a fellow active service member who's living the exact challenges that they might be living, whether that's a commander that's a little overzealous on how they apply something, or how do you get hormones in the military, and how do you transition while staying legal and in accordance with the UMCMJ. So there's a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring just on career support, like how do we take time off, how do we progress in our career, and that's general type of mentorship. The next two pillars of our organization are going to be education and advocacy. The education side was talking to Congress folk, talking to the Pentagon, talking to other commanders. So if there's an incident going on, our chapter leaders can reach up and we can start making phone calls. And it's now an active service member to active service members to try to grease the skids. And we take our Sparta hat off there, and then we're just leaders in the military. Then there's the advocacy side. That's working with the White House, working with Congress to try to get this codified into law. We have partnered previously to try to bring the Truman Amendment. This is a law that was first brought in 2019 that would codify open service, not only for trans service members, but also make it illegal to discriminate against you for national origin, ethnicity, religion, or orientation. We're going to get into these into the next few questions, but obviously the landscape has changed dramatically over the last couple months.
Great, thank you for that. Can you speak to some of the unique challenges facing transgender service members today and how Sparta Pride is advocating for them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for us is the same that most transgender individuals face in our country. We are 1%. We are never going to be the majority. So in order to advocate successfully, we have to build that allyship. We have to get other people speaking for us when we're not in the room. How Sparta does that is we encourage our members to put their boots on and show up to work and just thrive. Continue to show up and be the best soldier, airman, Marine, guardian that you can possibly be, and that's going to change people's minds. We don't even need to go into the rhetoric that's being thrown out there and the divisive language. One particular executive order said we are inherently untrustworthy, that we have no integrity and no honor. Well, we've had 10 years of open service nearly, and we've shown that all of those arguments are just not true. So while we saw the resurgence of a ban in 2019, I am hopeful that we are going to be able to limit that this time because of all those numbers showing up in just being excellent.
Great. And for those of us who want to support transgender service members and the work Sparta Pride is doing, what are the most impactful ways we can contribute to this effort right now?
Yeah, every single thing that you can do helps. Right before this call, I got a phone call from an old CO of mine, and he said, "Look, I've been watching from the sidelines, and I just needed to call you and tell you, I see you and I've got your back." And I was talking about you the other day, and everybody agreed. The people who know you agree and don't understand why we're doing that. So that's the first thing you can do. Carry that voice. Tell people that you know a trans service member and you know that they've done excellent work, and try to help us dispel that unfortunate myth that's being put out there that we are somehow inherently broken. The next side is, if you have a skill set that helps amplify our voice, reach out. If you are a lawyer, if you are a medical professional, if you are somebody who knows how to help individuals transition out of the military to find jobs, all of that stuff is very useful at this time, and we can connect you into the coalition and get those skills applied to where it's most helpful. Then there's obviously donations. Part of what we're doing here tonight is asking for help. Sparta typically operates off of a very small donation-based budget that normally supports, we do a passport grant, we do uniform grants, we do service members in needs grants, and then we also fund travel to bring our most excellent individuals into DC to do media training and teach them how to advocate for the community. Well, the needs have just exponentially grown. So I need to expand my budget extensively to be able to continue to provide that world-class support and respond to the ever-increasing challenges.
Great, thank you so much. And I know we've put the SpartaPride.org website in the chat. So please, everyone, write down these websites and please donate to help fund these great causes. So thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciate you being on board here. So up next, we're shifting focus to a segment called Stories of Us. In this segment, we'll explore the real-world implication of these pending policy changes through the lenses of someone who has not only worn the uniform during some of the most challenging times for LGBTQ plus service members, but has also fought tirelessly for the rest of all to serve authentically. These lived experiences will shed light on the human impact of discriminatory policies and the ongoing fight for justice and equality in military service. I'm truly honored to introduce our next panelist, Layla Ireland, a U.S. Army veteran and leading advocate for LGBTQ plus rights in the military. Layla has been at the forefront of efforts to create a more inclusive and equitable military, sharing her story, lived experience, and subject matter expertise to advance meaningful change. She has been a powerful voice in the fight against discriminatory policies, working to protect the rights and dignity of those who serve. Layla, thank you for being here with us tonight. Before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Yeah, thank you, Bob, for that introduction. Aloha kako and mahalo nui for having me today, everyone. My name is Layla Ireland. My pronouns are she, her. Yeah, and I'm a small town kid born and raised here in Hawaii. I'm a native Hawaiian, Filipino, and Puerto Rican. I'm a proud trans woman. I'm a retired Army veteran, a military spouse, and I continue to serve our people as a civilian in the military. So I think it's safe to say that I experienced life at many intersectionalities. But for the last decade, in my work, I've had the incredible opportunity to speak across our nation and work with organizations and institutions to ensure our existence and contributions don't go unnoticed. And there's so much rich history and stories to tell. And while the work has been super fruitful, there's still so much more work to do, and we are here to do that today.
Great. Thank you so much. So you've served during eras when policies like Don't Ask, Don't Tell and bans on transgender service force LGBTQ plus service members to hide who they are. Can you share part of your experience navigating that reality and how it shaped your service?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. I come from a very long and proud legacy of service members who dedicated their lives to the US military. And so from the moment when I graduated high school, there was no doubt in my mind that I too would end up wearing that uniform and answering the call to serve. And each day that I put on that uniform, I saw it as an opportunity to contribute to, however small, to the protection of what our country stood for. And I viewed it as a chance to be a part of something bigger than just myself. But serving under the constraints of Don't Ask and Don't Tell and the ban on transgender service meant living a double life. A lot of folks can resonate with that, and constantly fearing the consequences of being discovered. Navigating that environment was super stressful and also very isolating. It forced me to hide my true self from my fellow soldiers and leaders. But it was a calculated risk, the one that significantly affected my personal and professional relationships and outlook on life. And these policies created a climate of exclusion and fear for many of us who served under them. Yet, what I learned through my service, I learned something very valuable. Over the years, throughout deployments and shared challenges, I built bonds of trust and camaraderie with my fellow soldiers and leaders. And there was a point that it became very clear that neither my orientation nor my gender identity defined how they saw me. What truly mattered to them was my ability to contribute to the mission and ensure that we all made it home safely together. Because I was gradually opening up, sharing small parts of my authentic self with them, despite the exclusionary policies that we operated under, I was surprisingly met with support. They judged me not on who I was or how I identified, but merely on how I added strength to the team and helped us succeed together. And their acceptance inspired me to bring my full self to the mission. And each time I did, it motivated me to be a better soldier, a better leader, and a better version of myself. And that very idea is what has shaped my service until the end of my tour. So yes, it was a lot. I recognize that my experience is going to be different from other people, but I was able to navigate that because I had the support, because they saw me not as my identity or my orientation, but rather what I could bring to the table. And that's what we continue to tell our folks today.
Great, thank you. And as someone who's fought against discriminatory policies and helped lead the fight for LGBTQ plus rights in the military and veteran community, what advice do you have for those currently serving and facing these renewed attacks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think everybody, that question rests on everybody's minds. My advice for those currently serving and facing these renewed attacks, these very heinous renewed attacks on our rights, is while I know that many of our folks are feeling scared, uncertain, or overwhelmed by what's happening, that is okay. But remember, we have faced adversity before. We've been tested, targeted, and pushed apart, but we can overcome this because we remain unbreakable. Our contributions are undeniable, and no one can take that away from us. Together, we are powerful, we are worthy, and we will continue to stand tall with pride and strength and resilience. Remember to lean on the power of community. You're not alone in this. There's an entire network of service members, veterans, and organizations dedicated to supporting you through this fight. My advice would be to find your support system, know your worth, stay engaged and informed. Use your voice when you can, and most importantly, take care of your mental health, because then it helps you continue to be hopeful. You've already shown incredible strength by serving, so keep fighting for your right to do so authentically by showing up every day, boots laced and uniform on point with your best self continuing the mission. And know that countless people, including those who have fought similar battles, are standing with you every step of the way. We've made significant progress in the past because of the courage of people like you. While progress isn't linear, history will show that when we stand together, we win.
Great, thank you. And finally, real quickly, could you give us some advice for those of us who want to stand in solidarity? What can people both inside and outside of the military do to support LGBTQ plus service members, veterans, their families right now?
Yeah, for those out and inside and out of the military that want to support our folks, educate yourselves, become educated on LGBTQ plus issues, actively promote inclusivity and respect within your shared spaces, utilize available support networks. advocate for policy changes, and most importantly, and I think this is the most important one for me, is to share our stories. Because I believe that if we have any power as a people, it is the profound power of telling our own stories. The stories of those who came before us, the stories through history that prove our existence is real, and the stories that are present today. These stories will be our history lessons to those who will come way after us. And if your circumstances don't allow you to be out and vocal, you can always donate your time, money, and efforts to our organizations that are here represented today. Even when the risks are high, keep showing up however you can in any way you're able. Our existence depends on our resistance, and together we will overcome all of this.
Great. Hey, thank you so much, Layla Ireland. We really appreciate you being part of this. And thank you again. So up next, we have our next organization spotlight featuring the Modern Military Association of America, the nation's largest organization dedicated to LGBTQ plus service members, veterans, military spouses, their families, and allies. Modern Military serves as a united voice for the LGBTQ plus military and veteran community, advocating for policies that protect their rights and improve their lives. Through education, legal advocacy, and direct support, Modern Military champions the needs of LGBTQ plus individuals in service, veterans, and those living with HIV. Welcome to the stage, Rachel. We're so glad you could join us. To get us started, would you share a bit about yourself, your role, and what led you to become involved in this work?
Hi, yes, I'm Rachel Branneman, she, her. I'm the executive director for Modern Military and came on board to the organization in 2023 during a period of organizational transition. And due to my background working with underrepresented communities through a social justice lens and my general nonprofit expertise.
Great, thank you. To start, can you give us a snapshot of your organization, its mission, the people you serve, and the ways you support LGBTQ plus service members, veterans, and their families?
Yeah, absolutely. So Modern Military is the result of decades of work of 4 different organizations. So there was Service Members Legal Defense Network, American Military Partner Association, OutServe, and Military Partners and Families Coalition that all worked around different issues, including Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Defense of Marriage Act, and then also work to be a resource and voice for thousands of hidden partners. So all of them came together at different points in time, and in 2019 merged to become Modern Military. And we serve the entire community, which includes actively serving members, veterans, and their families. So we know that there's approximately 50,000 military affiliated youth that are part of this community as well that we're serving in addition to veterans and service members.
Great. And in SLDN, a dear friend of mine, Michelle Beneke, was part of that. So Modern Military and your predecessor organization, OutServe SLDN, has a long history of fighting discriminatory policies against LGBTQ plus individuals in the military. Can you take a moment to talk about the last trans ban and lasting impacts on your members?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of context. So in 2014, the then Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, recommended that the military reevaluate if the categorical ban on trans service should end. And so in 2015, his successor, Ash Carter, initiated a working group to explore policy and readiness implications. And that took about a year. And then those findings ultimately ended up overturning and making sure that service members could serve openly. We have a story of one trans service member who during that time period was excelling in her career. She'd won numerous awards and was commended for a deployment in the Middle East for the Joint Coalition Against ISIS. And she'd wanted to be in the military and make that her lifelong career, but she was really suffering internally by having to hide her self, especially when she was in deployed environments without privacy. So she had been considering separating at her next opportunity if she wasn't able to serve openly and take steps to transition. So when it was announced that trans folks could serve openly, it was, really exciting, and people felt supported and seen by the government. And then just a year later, the first administration, Trump administration, announced a trans ban by tweet, and that led to a lot of service members in our community feeling deeply betrayed by the government, who had told them just the year before that it was safe to come out, and now they were identified and could be kicked out and lose their careers and financial security. So we were part of that original litigation that fought the trans ban. And, you know, while that played out, service members and their families were really uncertain of whether or not they were going to be involuntarily separated, unsure about their futures, unable to make major financial decisions, unsure if they could continue accessing medical care, a lot of the same things that we're seeing again right now. So, you know, that policy ended up looking like if somebody had already served, who was already medically transitioned, they were allowed to remain in service. If someone serving had not yet transitioned but planned to, they had 2 months to obtain a gender dysphoria diagnosis, which required them to change their gender marker. And then the new policy prevented any trans person from joining the military. So it ended, you know, potential careers before they started. And while we don't know what this ban will look like, you know, we're hearing from people about, you know, they're living in a state of fear. They're worried about their futures, their stability, finances, retirement options. And we're working really hard to make sure we have resources available. We know that also during this time that, you know, it's not just the systemic policy changes that are a problem. We know that individual discrimination is on the rise as well. So we encourage everyone to come and report that on our discrimination reporting form on the website so we can track what is happening. And then we're also providing, you know, support groups and resources and toolkits for advocacy and working on building coalitions and amplifying and uplifting people's stories.
Great, thank you. And then finally, mental health and suicide prevention are critical issues, especially for LGBTQ plus service members and veterans. Can you share a little bit about your newly launched mental health and suicide prevention program and what support services you offer?
Yeah, so we were fortunate to get funding from the VA Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program, which allowed us to expand the groups that we already had in place. So we have peer facilitated virtual safe monthly groups. And we use that as a model to build out our resiliency circles as part of this larger suicide prevention program. So we know that LGBTQ veterans face higher rates of mental health concern and suicidal ideation and suicide attempts due to the unique stressors that they're facing based off of their sexual orientation or gender identity, alongside discrimination or other issues relating to intersectional traits. And so the military doesn't necessarily always align with therapy and prevention. And so that leads to unhealthy coping mechanisms rather than seeking help. So we are working on being a safe space for people to come, receive the resources they need, come to this monthly meeting, receive case management support, especially if you're worried about, financial issues, if you're worried about housing issues. Like, even if we aren't able to provide those services, we are finding ways to get folks connected, because we really understand that the future is going to be built on mutual aid and community trust.
Great. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we're so happy that we're partnered with Sparta and Modern Military. Thank you very much. So up next, we're going to dive into the fight ahead, a conversation about what's at stake and how we can continue to protect and uplift our community during this critical time. Joining us are two leaders and advocates from the Minority Veterans of America team, Vivian Richards and Lindsay Church. Vivian and Lindsay will guide us in exploring the strategies necessary to confront the challenges ahead and sustain our fight for justice and equality. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome. And could you both start by sharing a bit about yourself, your background, what drives your work, and how you came to be involved in advocating for our community? Let me go ahead and have Vivian start, and then Elsie, you go right after her.
Hi, so I'm Vivian Richards. I'm a retired Army Sergeant Major. I retired in 2020. So I've lived through all of the events we've talked about, from the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to the lifting of the trans ban, this trans ban reinstatement scare, and then us kind of shuffling out of that. Um, I retired in 2020. Now I work in tech and I'm a volunteer with MVA. What really gets me fired up about advocating for our community is because our community is America, right? The oath we take is to protect the concept of a multicultural, free society where a people is governed by their own will. And I think whenever you see, especially as a Black woman, whenever you see anyone being marginalized, you know there's a short distance between what you're witnessing and when it comes for you. So, I'll see.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay. I am the executive director and co-founder of Minority Vets. I use they, them pronouns. I am a third generation Navy veteran, much like Layla, generational services in my family. Most of us were Navy. There were like a couple Air Force folks we don't talk about. It's like, it's my running military joke. Sorry to the Air Force people, love you. I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I hid myself under that policy, was medically retired after 4 years after a particularly egregious military surgery. And I came out as transgender 2021 as trans non-binary. I am the co-founder of this organization. We started it in 2017, 12 days after the trans ban. We called it the Greatest Hits. Donald Trump's greatest hits in Generation One was the Women's March in the beginning, the Muslim ban, the trans ban. We started 12 days after that. And so we have been on the front lines trying as best we can to fight for a better future for everybody. I know I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I didn't have a voice then, and I have a voice now. To all of my service members that don't feel like you have a voice right now, I know I felt that way when I was serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and there are a lot more rigid policies of how you could use your voice. And so I just want to say to anybody who's wearing the uniform and doesn't feel like you can express yourself, we are here. We will use every bit of our civilian privilege, which is not a lot, but as best as we can, we will continue to fight, because I remember what it was like living under hellish policy. So glad to be here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Okay. Well, Elsie, we've been here before, facing hostile policies and efforts to erase our existence. Yet time and again, we've kept our community safe through mutual aid, mutual support, and staying connected. How can we draw on those same principles now to protect and strengthen our community in the face of these renewed attacks? What are the lessons you carry forward from past fights?
Yeah, so I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which meant hiding a lot of yourself. I know I didn't quite understand the military when I was going into it, and so I inherited a military that I wasn't quite familiar with, and so it meant hiding a lot of yourself. And the attempts to erase us, that just because we were, allowed to be there, we had to hide everything about ourselves, and so there was a deep sense of erasure. And if you were transgender during this time, there was a deeper sense of erasure. When we think about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, many people don't talk about the fact that it was only for sexual orientation, that transgender people have been serving under these policies. If you look at the history since 2012, we've seen a half a dozen policies that have changed and uprooted people's lives. And so we have a deep history of understanding the deeply rooted gender and sexual minority services discrimination that we faced every single time that we wear the uniform, and yet we continue to persist. I know trans people, I'm very proud of the fact that we serve at double the rate our cisgender counterparts, and that was numbers that we see before the ban was lifted. And I know so many patriotic transgender Americans that continue to wear the uniform. If you look back in military history, you'll see a long history of gender diversity, of sexual minorities, of drag. Like, you will look at World War II, people were doing drag to keep us sane on the front lines. The military has a long history of actually of a queer culture. And so I look to generations past. I know I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and there was a far more aggressive policy before I served, where they actually hunted people. And, they were not great to us, but they were worse to the generation before. I you know, as much as I hate the torch idea, like every generation of service members that are LGBTQ have fought for their rights, have fought for the right to wear the uniform. And we shouldn't have to fight that twice. We shouldn't have to fight in uniform to, you know, protect our country, but we also like, and also fight the war to be able to wear the uniform. And yet we do, because one, our service relies on it, but I think many of us look to the future generation service relies on it. And so I think about those, you know, the legacies of our community that live on, you know, the Marsha P. Johnsons that most people don't know served in the Navy. You've got the Harvey Milks who were, you know, the front lines of the civil rights, or, you know, like the LGBTQ rights movement in San Francisco. And so I think to those historical moments to really root this moment in the civil rights movement that we are actually a part of. Sometimes I think 9/11 disjointed us from that, but ultimately we are part of a larger civil rights movement. So I take those with me, hoping that we can carry those with us in the torch that we have right now.
Great, thank you so much. Hey, Viv, let's talk about recycled hate. We've seen time and again how the same discriminatory rhetoric and tactics are repackaged to target different communities, whether under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the military trans ban, or today's anti-DEI and anti-LGBTQ plus policies. From your perspective, how does this cycle of hate and resistance continue to play out? And what lessons can we learn from past fights to confront it today?
You made it.
Yeah, so I want to start with the last part first, which is what can we learn from past fights? And what you can learn from past fights is that we won them. Is that we won them,
Yeah.
right? When we talk about where we were before January 20th, or some of us before November 5th, many of us on this panel at the behest of the White House have been in the halls of the White House. LC has been a guest of the president of our United States on multiple occasions, right? So I never want you to ever, 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 ever forget that. A lot of what the historical repeats, history, what they say, it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. A lot of the rhyme of what we are feeling also originated in less than integrated, less than blended, less than culturally aware societies than ours, right? So right now we're at a real battle of wills. Those of us who feel that it is an existential thing, if we are talking to our trans community, the fact that someone feels like they can write on a piece of paper that you no longer exist is it's surreal and it's dystopian. And that fear is valid. That fear, I know, has rhymed throughout all of history. But what's different this time? What I really hope we're all taking away, what's different this time, is that there is a bigger resistance than just us. Many of us feared that it would just be us, that every single court case we're talking about would just be one of us. And it's not. It's not, right? So there are liberties and rights that are interwoven in our fabric, in our id now, that we cannot allow someone to flip a switch or write on a piece of paper to change any of that. That is what a king does. That is tyranny. And a king tyranny requires you to be a subject to it. And this is what we resist. Our existence is not debatable anymore. Everything we're talking about right now has been litigated. It's been litigated through thorough research with data to prove our own humanity and equality. But you know what? The data proved out. The data proved out. That's how we won. We didn't win by tricking people, you know. We won with the data. So the data is not going to work in their favor, right? And if I could just segue to the question about like military leaders in this moment, there's nothing that has legalized disrespect. There's nothing that has legalized dishonor. There's nothing that's legalized violence against the person to your right or left, right? So the military operates under a standard of dignity and respect, and there's nothing that's giving comfort to any behavior contrary to that. So we've got to be real clear-eyed. We've got to be real authentic when we're engaging with each other, and we've got to build real connection. The leader who cannot understand why it is their job to keep their own service members under their command or their care safe from anything should question their role in the military. But the ones who get it, you need to educate yourself. You need to educate yourself on the terms, the maneuvers, the procedures that historically have been used to try to make pawns out of the military to execute some sort of fascistic actions, right? We're not there, but each one of us have to take account that when the time comes, we'll stand on courage. And that courage can be a beautiful act of nonviolence and resistance. And it can empower everyone around you to do the exact same thing. You know, I served in Iraq in OIF-1 with a conscientious objector who was a friend of mine. And I watched us in live combat make sure that soldier was cared for, make sure we found roles that that soldier could participate in, make sure that soldier had a sense of service with dignity and honor and came back. And there was never a separation from the fold. In fact, what there was this new understanding of why so many of us veterans come back pacifistic, right? We kind of come back saying enough is enough, you know, especially when it comes to cultural wars, because we've served with each other in close quarter, life or death. And much of that life or death continues for the rest of our life because that's how strong these bonds are. So no one can tell you who you are. No one can flip a switch and do that. Right. And as long as you know if that moment happens that you're not alone, you're in community and the majority of people are with you, then hopefully that gives us courage through this dark period.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Finally, Elsie, what message would you give to service members and veterans who are facing these renewed attacks? How can they rely on the power of community, mutual aid, and connection to protect themselves and each other as we continue this fight for equity and inclusion?
Well, I'm just gonna say one, come through Sergeant Major. I don't even think that I said that right. I'm Navy after all. So I thank you, Vid, for that. I needed the fire inside of me. The message that I have for people currently wearing the uniform about the moment that we face is going back to the idea of erasure. There have been generational attempts. They have tried so hard in every generation of service member. They have tried desperately to erase us, like find a way to keep us in a closet or to keep us, relegated to not serving, but still knowing we're there. But what they can't do is get rid of us because we're seeds. I think about this like you tried to bury us, but you didn't realize that we were seeds. Every single one of us who wears a uniform and puts their boots on the ground plants a seed. And that seed flourishes through generations and gives the next generation the tools and the wisdom that they need to carry on in the fight ahead. And so I think about this idea that every one of us that served in that uniform, we planted seeds. You are planting seeds today. They cannot erase us because we are seeds and we will grow a new generation and we will fight for a new generation because we are a new generation. You all are the next generation of service members that will wear the uniform, but also carry the burden of what it means to wear the uniform. Most people take for granted the idea of military service, but the LGBTQ community does not take for granted the idea of military service because we had to fight time and time and time again for the right to wear the uniform. And yet we still do time and time again because we feel it in our hearts and our souls and in every fiber of our being that we are meant to wear that uniform. And so to every person that wears that uniform today, you are meant to wear that uniform. You are meant to wear that uniform. And we out here will keep fighting for your right to do so. We may not win today, we may not win tomorrow, but I can tell you, we will fucking win. We don't lose because if we have not won, it's just not time. We will keep fighting and we will keep doing everything that we know how to do, which is to keep our community safe. One of the things that I heard in this whole fight that has stuck with me is that It is our job in this moment to wrap our arms around the most vulnerable communities and hold on for dear life. And that is what we are doing. So to my service members who are wearing the uniform in deep moments of uncertainty, get tight as a community. We existed, we persisted, we kept wearing the uniform, and we did it because we knew who each other were. We knew who was safe. We knew who the people we were, the leaders that we could talk to, the people that would protect us, and the people that absolutely would not. We existed through Whisper networks. We existed through knowing who was safe and how we could talk to each other. We created an underground network that kept us safe. Create it again. You already have the beauty of it in the sadness of social media, but you have an opportunity to connect to each other in a way that we just had to like write notes in boot camp and hope for the best. The second is find resources. These organizations exist to help you, whether it be that you're going to stay in service and we're going to give you every tool that we can, every legal resource, every bit of support that we can, or if you're transitioning out of the military, get connected. Do not try to do this alone when you're also getting out of the military. Find an organization, find a community. Do not stay disconnected, because the worst thing for every single one of us is to not be connected, because we lose hope. And what we can't live without, we can live without many, many, many things, but we cannot live a moment without hope. So find each other, hold on for dear life, and do not, under any circumstances, lose yourself. In this battle, we will lose many things, and we already have. I know as a non-binary person, Monday was fucking hard. Literally watching my federal government be weaponized to make sure that people like me don't exist, or at least on paper, they can't take it away from us. I won't lose myself or give up who I am because anybody has written in a Sharpie that I don't exist. So do not, under any circumstances, lose yourself. It's the only thing that you can't lose besides hope.
Great, thanks. And Viv, real quickly, we need to move on a little bit, but can you give some, like, one or two pieces of advice? What would you give to leaders on how they can stand up for and protect their service members, particularly LGBTQ plus and other minority service members during this renewed discriminatory time?
The first thing I would say is rigid adherence to the regulation and the standards, right? And that's the best way to quell a lot of discourse on either side, right? Because what you're saying is safety is going to come first, respect's going to come first, dignity is going to come first. If you are a leader and you want to be, you want to enable your folks that are reaching out to you on how to engage in civics, please remind our service members that they do not lose their rights as citizens, their rights to engage in local activities. There's a set of regulations around what they can and cannot do. And also, this generation is different. And so, when they have their ideas of how they want to get down and they want to get funky with it, we've got to start being a lot more open, a lot more inclusive, to our current service members getting higher visibility in social spaces or in information spaces. It's something that our generation had a great level of discomfort with. We already know they're different. And so if that is the way that they're making their peers feel safe and know who is safe around them, we're going to have to be able to advocate for that as well. So I really do urge leaders to remind your service members that, that they have the right to political expression and full citizenship, as long as, they're stateside and whatever is afforded to them overseas. And then you're going to have a lot of folks that just say, I don't want to, I want to dig my head in the sand and, whatever I'm told to do, that's what I'm going to do. Yet to a point, right? One of the greatest things any veteran suffers with, and I would tell you all this, I've spoken to veterans from, every conflict that have been alive while I've been alive, and moral injury is a different kind of injury, right? And I want you to make sure you don't let anything morally injure you. If that is, you're the one who has to tell a trans soldier that they are can't be in a certain, refuse. If those words coming out of your mouth will unsettle your spirit in a way that shakes you up, refuse. Tell them to find someone else, right? And just things like that begin to protect your sense of who you are, because the slippery slope of moral injury is what I think every veteran in this country fears. That our service members will get overwhelmed with groupthink, some sort of forcible pressure, and the next thing you know, you're doing something because I was just following orders. Let me let you know how that turned out. Let me let you know how that turned out, right? And so think through your ways of, active civic engagement as an outlet. Allow soldiers to be service members to be as expressive as they need to be. That still maintains respect and dignity. And here's the last thing I'm going to say: if you find a group of folk willing to actually talk, even if it's fiery, and you get to mediate that, there's a power in that I really urge leaders to begin to maybe explore. Because in these close quarters, in the living nature of the military, you have the opportunity for great personal growth, great knowledge, cross-cultural, cross-experience insights. And so we also don't want to not be courageous enough to think that we can handle mediating conversations like that.
Great. So thank you, Viv and Elsie. Really appreciate it. So we're going to move on, and I know we've gone a little over time, but I think people will stick with us. Please do, because we've got some really exciting things coming up. So founded in 2017 in Seattle, Washington, Minority Veterans of America is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to creating community, belonging, and advancing equity for minority and underrepresented veterans, including racial and ethnic minority, LGBTQ+, women, and religious and non-religious minority veterans. Together, our community is working to change the narrative of the American veteran and create a military and veteran community where we all belong and have an opportunity to thrive. So here with us today to speak about MVA is Eric Ballantyne. Eric, thanks for joining us. Would you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Ballantyne. I am our flagship director here in Seattle. I am an Army veteran of 5 years. I served from 2000 to 2005 under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I have done a variety of things since I got out.
Okay. And we know that MVA centers on creating belonging and equity for minority veterans. Can you elaborate on some of the organization's work and how you're making an impact on the lives of those you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. Centering on that creating belonging piece, right, I think is really important. And that comes from a place of we hear a lot of different people who serve veterans and serve different people in a variety of different capacities, and they all say the same thing, right? Is they talk about serving the whole veteran. And what does that really mean, right? And like for me, and us as an organization, we need to consider your identities, your experiences, and possible trauma that you've experienced before, during, and after the military, right? I think there's a lot of rhetoric that's often regurgitated in terms of, oh, we all wear green, or I don't care who you are, and the fact is, right, with us as an organization, we do care about all those things, right? Like we understand that you're not just a veteran, right? Like you're a mother, you're a father, you're trans, you're Black, and understand that there are a variety of different experiences that come with all of those. And those are equally important, especially because they're important to you. If it's important to you, it's important to us because that's a part of who you are. So we do a lot of that, right? We do a lot of community building, right? We do community engagement. We host monthly events that are free or very minimal cost to anybody to attend. Right. We also do that through outreach, right? And a lot of people enroll into our program. They need case management and maybe financial assistance and peer-to-peer support. And that's one of the big things that we do. We have a lot of programs that are coming up, right? We'll talk a little bit about community house, but we also have like a community center coming up, right? Which is going to be a huge thing for us, right? Because that allows us to have a space for people to come to, whether that's for an appointment or they want to come and see another provider, a guest provider that's visiting that day, or they want to take a workshop, or maybe they just need a space to chill and decompress, and that's okay too, right? Building our community is really, really important. So I'm really excited about that.
Great, thanks. And you and the team, MBA team, did something really incredible last year in service to the LGBTQ plus veteran community by opening Community House in Seattle. And I was so happy and very honored to be there for that opening. Can you tell us what Q House is and what makes it so unique? And also, if any veterans are in need, how can they apply for housing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Q House or Community House, is a transitional housing program. However, that program is exclusively for veterans who come from the queer community, right? And so we tailor all of our services based on what their experience is. I have a background in actually running shelters and transitional houses, and so with that experience that I've had, we're trying to shape something that hasn't been done before. We're doing things a little bit differently, right? And I love one right off the bat. We have that veteran to veteran connection, right? But also there's just that like that life experience and like that understanding. And the goal is for people to come into this program, right? Gain some skills, get the stability that they need, um, and then exit out of that program, but hopefully come back and continue to contribute to that program in some way or another, right? We have like a community garden, a lovely kitchen, and so we're going to host a lot of things at the house for those people based on what it is that the needs are that they're identifying, right? So if a lot of folks have been homeless for a while and haven't had to utilize a full kitchen, maybe they want to refresh their kitchen skills. Boom, we got you, right? Doing all kind of those things and really trying to restore community inside the house, right? But also make sure that when they exit the house, they're still connected to us as a community, and then learn to build their own the way that they see fit. So I'm really excited about it.
Great, thank you. And for anyone who hasn't seen what that looks like, check out our website. They've got some great photos also on the Facebook site. So finally, for those who want to support MVA's work and stand in solidarity with the minority service members, veterans, and their families, what actions can they take right now to make a meaningful impact?
Yeah, so I'll say it very number one, money is always great, right? Part of our flagship program is our People to People program, which gives direct financial assistance. We're also hiring for a program manager in that position as well. And so I can tell you right now that as a person who's handling all the cases right now, we're not even halfway through the second month, and we've already had about 30, we're at about $3,500 worth of financial assistance requests, right? So we're moving at a rapid pace, and a lot more requests are coming in more frequently, based on what the current situation is, but also from the fact that we're just getting more popular, right? There's a lot more service providers out here that are learning about us and are learning that some of the clients they're serving are eligible for some of our funding. So we're actually partnering with a lot of great organizations. That's a great thing, but also it's like, hey, we need a little bit of sense of urgency with cash flow. Two, right? We'll have a lot of volunteer opportunities come up. So don't hesitate to come out. We need help with the house, yard work, doing things like that. And then also we have our monthly events. Like don't hesitate to come out. And also let people know who we are, where we are. Follow us on Instagram. Log on to that web page and see what's happening. Like figure out and learn about what we're doing, because we're doing a lot of cool stuff, and we're doing stuff that more importantly that the community is asking for. So if you're seeing an event, if there's an event that you want, or so you've seen too many events that annoy you, let us know. Give us feedback so that we can build an event to get you to come out.
Great. Hey, thank you so much, Eric. Really appreciate you joining us tonight and talking about Minority Veterans of America and Community House and all those others. So we're going to take a few minutes right now to take some of the questions that have been asked from the audience and elsewhere. So I'm going to bring back some of our panelists. So for question number one, Layla and Rachel, what suggestions do you have to assist military leaders in having supportive and positive discussions with their personnel who are frightened and feel devalued?
Layla, do you want to start or would you like me to?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, great. So I would suggest first creating a safe space for open communications. That means actively listening, avoiding judgment, maintaining confidentiality, and being approachable. So how do you become approachable? That is by becoming educated, reading up on the issues that are facing the community, and being an active ally. And then it's also really important not to just, gloss over concerns. I'd say you need to address fears and concerns head on, acknowledge those emotions, and make sure you're providing accurate information. And, we have different websites like of all the organizations, but then there's also, I think it's transmilitaryrights.org that is available for general resources. And then offer reassurance and just make sure that they know that you're there to support them, and things are going to get rough, but there are people out there to be part of that support system and provide mutual aid and community.
Yeah, to a caveat off of what Rachel was saying, Albert Einstein made a quote and said, "What is right is not always popular, and what is popular isn't always right." And I think what it boils down to is having good leadership traits. Anyone with good leadership traits is always going to take care of their people. One of my great leaders once told me that if you take care of your people, the mission will take care of itself. And I think when we have good leaders that see and value their members, that not necessarily, you don't have to coddle to care, but to make sure that they are, again, investing in those spaces, and allowing their folks to share how they're feeling about what's going on, and again, showing them that they value their worth as part of the team. That's going to make a huge difference, and that's going to make them more effective as a team and a fighting force. So when we're talking about leaders trying to be positive, foster those positive conversations, foster those positive discussions, listen to your people. They're the ones that are experiencing it. They're the ones that are going to tell you what they need. And that is your chance to act as a leader. We have seen inaction, a lack of leadership happening currently. But this is our time. This is where we're at, and this is what we need to do. And so we know what the footwork is. We know what we need to do as a whole. And we're going to continue to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So let me bring back Peter and LC. In what ways can active service members fight back, resist, and otherwise advocate for our right to exist and serve within the confines of UCMJ and these new executive orders?
I'm going to let the attorney answer before I answer because I'm an organizer. I have a different answer, but I'm going to let the legal answer come first, and then I'll jump in. How about that?
All right. Well, I've already hedged a lot in the Q&A on this question, mostly because it's a touchy subject. With the question even mentions that UCMJ, and depending on whether you're enlisted or officer, your oath is a little different. You are not required to follow illegal orders, for example, but you are required to obey legal ones. And until the court says otherwise, some of these orders are legal or will be considered legal. So my advice is just to be cautious, talk to trusted people, be aware of your command environment, and outside of work, feel free to connect with our organizations, Sparta, MBA, and Modern Military, and kind of be active in the background. Like you heard from some currently serving people, even on this webinar, who are doing great work. And they're doing that while kind of separating themselves from their official persona. And that's perfectly acceptable. And we encourage everybody to do that. Apart from that, I would just say, if you're an ally, or even if you are a member of our community, just be compassionate, be empathetic, and be supportive on a personal level, because that always goes a long way.
I'm going to answer two questions at once. One, I'm going to answer your question, Bob, and then I'm going to answer the question about EOs and the impacts of VA. First and foremost, all of what Peter said, and exists within the legal confines of what you're allowed to do. If you've served in the last few years, you know the lines for political protest and things like that. They are changing. We are in a different time, but many of those policies will likely change. As somebody who wore the uniform under Don't Tell and had many moments where I was challenged as a human being about what I was willing to accept in order to serve my country. There were many conversations about growing my hair out and finding a gay man to be my boyfriend, to like hide myself. Literally, this is the advice that leadership used to give you: is find a gay man to be your boyfriend, and grow your hair out and you would be fine, which I didn't particularly care for, which is like, find your line, I will say, is like, we are entering a new era. I think about the times I served after 9/11, and I think about the folks that joined or were in before 9/11 and then 9/11 happened. And the military that they were in was very different than the military before 9/11. Some folks were in boot camp, like in process, they had joined during peacetime, and it was a very different experience than the vibe after 9/11 was very different than the peacetime experience that they were expecting. And so what I would say is find your line. Going back to my point about don't lose yourself, find your line and what your limit is. Exists in the confines of the protest. I used to go to protests, and for any of the old folks in the room, the Meet in the Middle for Equality, Prop 8, that was like one of the big deals while I was in the military. If you remember marriage equality, Prop 8 in California, I used to go to rallies and I would hide myself. They would sneak us into clubs. They would sneak us into everything. I had a line. My limit was like, I was never going to grow my hair out. Like I was just not going to do it. If you can't accept me with at least my short hair, like I'm not meant for this place. And so what I would say to service members is exist in your uniform for as long as you can do it. I say the same thing to government employees right now. We're in a different time where the uniform we are wearing represents something very different. You're being asked to go to Guantanamo Bay to detain citizens, like to detain migrants, to detain people. This is a very different time. So find your line. What is your moral line? What is your line that you're willing to accept for what you're compromising about yourself? Some of these moments, like, should they act in the ways that they could mean sacrificing yourself to serve and detransition, like serving in your birth sex. Like some of these are very real and pressing questions that for yourself you have to ask in advance. What is my line? As a trans person, I'm not willing to detransition to wear any uniform or to do goddamn anything. I will fight you. Just know that. But like, that's my line. So where is your line? Find your line, find your limit, exist within it. For the folks that are asking questions about VA, we will likely do another one of these to talk about veterans benefits because there is a lot changing. We don't know a lot, but a lot is already happening. They're saying that there's nothing happening, and it's a lie. I'm non-binary. My sex has already been changed on my birth. I now have birth sex on my all of my records now. Like things have already started to change, even though they say that they're not. So I can tell you, if you want to see it, it is happening. So many things are happening on the VA front. There is no ban on gender affirming care. There is no ban on there's no actual written guidance besides just some emails that say you have to change your pronouns. Most of this stuff is not legal. If you're a VA employee, ask all of the questions. What they are doing is not legal. Ask questions, get it all in writing. Stuff that's changing at VA, they have not issued official guidance. If they're going to take away gender affirming care, they have to go through rulemaking. They cannot just take away your care. They have to go through the federal process. We have rules around here. So if somebody tries to deny you care, turn around and say, I want it in writing. I'm going directly to the patient advocate, and I'm going directly to my member of Congress, and I'm going to ask an attorney if this is legal. They will likely back down and continue to give you the care that you are entitled, because until they go through rulemaking, they cannot take away your care. Do not let them take away your care. Tell them to fuck off. I'm not like necessarily that, but I would. But they cannot require that you don't get care. So you have rights. There are no changes yet. People are complying in advance, expecting that they will have to do these things. So what I would say to everybody that's having challenges already within the VA system, challenge everything, ask questions, make everything go in writing, ask your member of Congress to help you advocate, fight everything, find an attorney, find everybody that's willing to fight this, because what we need to be is sand in the gears of the machine. And we need to be sand in the gears of the tank that's coming directly for us. It is our job to put as much sand in the gears as we possibly can.
And if
Great.
you need ammo, go to the website that Lindsay posted. I think it's
Militarytransrights.com
Thank you.
or
And
.org. I'm sorry, I'll drop it in here.
our partners at Yale Law School's Veterans Services Center, are available for assistance and advice in some cases, or they might refer out to some of us practitioners. But if you need the ammo, there is a regulation, as Lindsay mentioned, that specifies what is the care that you're entitled to. And right now, it includes gender affirming care with the surgery carve out, right, which was never fixed. So until that is changed, your care should not change. Obviously, the VA is now controlled by somebody who was appointed by Trump. They may attempt to change that without a change in the regulation, but I'm positive that the legal community will respond to that in the appropriate way.
Right. Well, Peter and Elsie, thank you so much for that. And for all of those who've joined us today, a lot of your questions in the Q&A have been answered online. Hopefully you saw those. We'll try and make those available if you want them later on. And the whole purpose of tonight, and thank you for staying with us. You can't, this is such an important topic. You can't cram this down into 1 hour. I knew that wasn't going to happen, but thank you for staying with us. Let me bring back Elsie for a quick appeal and the whole point of why we're coming together.
I should have just left the pin up, but I just thank you everybody for showing up tonight. This is a moment that many of us knew was coming in some shape or form, but really this moment is the scariest. As an organizer, I've been through a lot and seen a lot and experienced a lot, and this is one of the hardest moments for our community. And so many of us feel like we don't have any ways of really actually doing anything right now, and this is one way that you can do it. I don't care if you have $5. I don't care if you share it with everybody that you know that cares. MBA, we're fortunate to be funded by a program that won't be affected by many of these things, but our partners are not. I love our partners in Sparta and Modern Military, and they need the funding. We need the funding. Our community needs resources right now. There is an outpaced need for what we have right now for the number of people that are going to be accessing care that can no longer look to the VA, that can no longer look to DoD. For many of you all that might not be familiar, 1 in 5 trans people will serve in the military at some point, which makes the VA and the DoD some of the largest providers of healthcare, some of the largest providers of employment to transgender individuals in this country. When you shut down those pathways and you make it harder to serve, you create a greater need within our community. When we are facing, challenges to whether or not we have access to care, whether or not we have access to service, whether or not our children and our families have access to care, all of those are critical needs that organizations like MMA, Sparta, and MBA will be filling in the next 4 years and maybe beyond. And so I ask you all for whatever support you have to be able to donate it tonight. We don't ask for money very often, and this is one of those moments where if you can't if you feel like you have nothing to offer, we have many things to offer, whether it be time, resources, influence, money. Somebody was talking about skills. There's always something to be given in this movement. And so whatever it is that you have to give, if you don't have funds, give time. If you don't have time, give resources, give connections, share the mission and share these organizations with others. And so thank you for being here tonight. This is an evolving situation, so you will likely see us again, but thank you so much for being here tonight.
Great. Thank you, Elsie. And we put the link to the Give Butter donation site there. And again, everybody, thank you so much for taking your time. This is such an important topic. It's such an important time for all of us. So I thank all of the panel members, the presenters, and I'm just really proud to be a part of of Minority Veterans of America, and thank you, Sparta, and thank you, Modern Military Association. So again, thank you for your time, and we hope to see you again. And anything that you can do to support all three of these organizations, please do. Big or small, it doesn't matter, or even just vocally. Thank you so much. So everyone have a great night. It's been my pleasure to be facilitating this discussion tonight. So thank you so much.